Hello there, all my lovely jewelry makers. I'm Christina of CSLdesigns, and in today's tutorial I'm going to show you how to make this macrame heart bracelet. So we basically have these cute hearts stacked on top of each other all the way along, and then I finished mine off with ribbon ends here so we can attach a clasp. Now, like most of my jewelry, they will be available for sale in my shop. Link will be in the description box below the video. And I do also sell kits and tutorials on there, among others a macrame starter kit that might be useful if you're new to macrame. Otherwise, if you want to learn how you can make this bracelet, then keep watching. So these are the materials that we'll need. Now, first of all, we need our cord, and I'm using this Tex 400 c-lon cord, but you can easily use something else. Different cords will give you different results. And then we need some beads. So I'm using 3mm rounds. Now, of course, you can use whatever kind of beads you want to. Just make sure the holes are large enough to take the cord through. Now, the specific ones I'm using are metal spacer beads where the holes tend to be pretty generous. And then to finish off the bracelet, I'm going to be using these 20mm ribbon ends that have these little loops in them where we can attach our findings. So I'm using a lobster claw clasp and extender chain and a few jump rings to put it together. You can of course use whatever kind of clasp you prefer. Now, along with the ribbon ends, I'm also going to be using this E6000 glue to give it extra security. Now, I'm going to be working on this mini macrame board throughout. It has these notches all the way around on the edges. It's going to make it really handy to work with. And then I'm just going to use a couple of pliers as well for the ribbon ends and jump rings. Now, you can find the full material list and useful links in the description box down below. Otherwise, let's get it all ready and let's get started. Now, we need to cut some lengths of our cord. So what I have is 14 lengths of about 1.2 meters, and I've also just made sure the ends are even and tied a knot towards one end, leaving a tail of about 15 centimeters or so. And this is just to keep the cords together. So first of all, just want to get my cords attached to my board here. So I've separated the cords into two groups with 7 in each, and then I'm just going to choose 2 slots that are right next to each other and put a group in each. And this is going to be a starting point, and then we can just put the cords out to each their own side so we don't get too tangled up. So we're going to get straight into making the hats, and I'm going to work with one group at a time here, so you can just kind of get the other cords out of the way for now, just so we don't get tangled up. And I'm just going to focus on the left one. It doesn't matter what side you start on. Then I just want to separate my cords out, so I'm going to grab 2 outer cords and leave them out to the side. And then I want to grab one that's more to the inside, so kind of more in the middle here of the 2 groups. And then we have 4 cords left. So again, just put these out of the way, out to the sides, so we don't get tangled up while we're using these ones here. So I have these 4 cords, and again, I'm just going to pick out 2 outer ones of those. And then we have the 2 coming straight down in the middle here. Now what I'm going to do is take the 2 outer ones, the one on each side, again just focusing on these 4 middle ones, and cross them over the 2 middle ones to the opposite side, and then the right one goes over towards the left here. So they're crossing in the middle, and I'm kind of keeping hold of both cords at the same time here. Now I've got them a little bit further away from everything because obviously we need the space to hold on to them. Then I'm going to take 1 cord at a time that's coming underneath the 2 that we have coming straight down, and just do a half hitch knot around the 2 cords here and make sure it comes in the middle of kind of the loop we created, and it comes right back down. Then we can pull it up a little bit, so where the bracelet is going to start basically, and I just want to bring it around again and make another half hitch. And then before I pull this tight, now this can be a little bit fiddly because we don't have anything in place yet, but just take your time, and we just want to have a starting point here where the hat is going to start. So I'll pull the first half tight, and then I'm just going to pull the other half tight and have this knot sit right up there. And so that's the first cord. Then I'm going to take the other cord that's coming straight down, do the same thing, and this knot that we're making is going to sit right next to the one we just made. So make the half hitch, pull it down, and make the other one. So we have a double half hitch, and just make sure the holding cords that we're holding on to here that are crossing inside of the knots are nice and taut, and then tighten that. So we're basically creating 2 double half hitches on top of these 2 holding cords that are crossing inside of the knots. Now what you can see is it looks quite messy, so what I'm going to do is take the ends of the 2 cords that are crossing, and we can start to pull them, which then pulls the loose cord tighter and brings it up to sit more in a straight line. So this is going to be creating the curved part of the hat at the very top. And I just like to also start the outer side while we're here. So I'm going to take this cord that's coming through the knots there, crossing over, but that's going towards the side. So in this case, towards the left. And just grab hold of that. It's still going to be the holding cord. And then I'm going to take one of the other cords that we put out to the side in the beginning there. So one of the two. And just grab onto that. And then make a half hitch knot around that holding cord. And then tighten that up next to the other knots that we made. So we're kind of continuing the row going outwards in that direction. And then just around one more time. So we make it a double. So the second half here kind of tightens the first half in place. Make sure the first half is tight before we then tighten the second half. Like that. And we can slowly also start to kind of bring it downwards at a bit of an angle to get that curve of the hat in place. Now take the last one, bring it down underneath the holding cord, and then I'm going to bring it around the finger there and then back over the top and underneath the holding cord, making sure I loop through itself, which is what creates the knot, and then bring that up and then make the other half. So loop around the holding cord and then tighten it here. And as you can see, I'm starting to work my way kind of downwards so we get that curve in place. Now don't worry if it's not too perfect yet because things are still loose. So then what I'm going to do is just move to the right of this group of cords. So we have one left that we haven't used yet. That's hanging out in the middle between the two groups there. What I'm going to do is bring that underneath the holding cord on the other side. So this is the one going towards the right in this case. And the one to the right is the holding cord, the one coming underneath is the working cord, and here I'm going to do the same. Just do a double half hitch, bring it over the top, back underneath, and through the loop of itself. You can see when we do that, we kind of create, in this case, a 6, and the other side is kind of a reverse 6, but then we just tighten that. And again here I want to start working my way downwards a bit, so we get the curve on the inside, where the cleft is, and then do the other half and tighten that as well. So now I'm going to put all these cords out of the way to the side where they're coming from so we don't get tangled up when we now move to the other side, and basically repeat the exact same thing with these. Now remember, on this side we're going to do it in the mirrored image, so that means I'm on the right side. That means to the right I'm going to take 2 cords closest out to the side and just separate them out and put them out of the way. And on the inside, I'm just separating out 1 length and putting that to the opposite side there. So we're left with the 4 cords in the middle. And from those, I just want to separate out 2 going out to either side that we're going to be working with for now. And the 2 in the middle are coming straight down. And this is where we need to cross the 2 cords on the sides here to the opposite sides, over the top of the 2 that are coming straight down. And then we just want to repeat. So I'm going to take 1 cord at a time that's coming underneath and use as a working cord, and we're making the double half hitches around both of the holding cords in the area where they're crossing each other. So that's the first one. We can tighten that down, and you just want to try and get it to about the same level as we have on the other side there. Then bring it around again, and then tighten down the other half of the knot. And then use the other working cord that's coming underneath and make your double half hitch also around both holding cords there. Do 1 knot at a time and tighten them down. And then this is where we take the holding cords and just pull them tighter so we get rid of this loose cord, mainly on the one side. We're pulling it through the knots and getting that straight line, and just make sure that it's about level with the other side. If you find that it's a bit too far down, you can always pull tighter on these cords here and it'll bring it further up. But then we just need to continue the rows a bit, so I'm going to start on the outside, bring 1 of the 2 cords to the side underneath the holding cord here, make a double half hitch, tighten that up next to the other ones, and then tighten the other half. And again, I'm starting to work my way downwards a bit so we get the curve, and you do that simply by changing the direction of your holding cord while you're tightening the knot. Then I'm going to just grab the last one on this side, do the double half hitch, working my way downwards. And there we go. And then we're just missing the one in the middle here, so I'm going to use the holding cord on the other side of these knots and just grab the remaining cord that we haven't used. It's going to be a working cord, and make my double half hitch to basically create that cleft of the hat. Tighten that. Again, remember we're coming downwards a bit. And tighten that. So now we kind of have the two top halves of the curved part of the hat. We basically need to put them together. And to do that, I'm going to grab the two holding cords that are going towards the middle here, one from either side. So just separate those out. And then I'm going to cross one over the other. Now it doesn't really matter which one you cross over and under. I personally like to just keep it consistent throughout the bracelet, so I always do the same one. But I'm crossing the right one over the left one, so that means the right one here is the holding cord and the left one that's coming underneath is the working cord. So I'm going to make a double half hitch with that working cord and then bring it up, tighten that. Just make sure that it's tight before I then tighten the other half. And bring that up there. And then we can kind of see we have the cleft part. Now it still looks a bit messy, but it's because everything is still loose. It will look better once we get further on. So now I'm going to start making the inside of the hat, so we can basically create the rest of the hat shape around that. So, and first of all, again, just start on one side at a time. I'm going to separate out the two outer cords, which means the holding cord on this side and also the very last working cord here, just out of the way. And then I'm also going to separate out the very inner one that we basically use to make the connection point. And then what we're going to be left with are 4 cords here in the middle, and just separate them out so they're all satin next to each other. We don't want them crossing over each other as we're doing this part. So I'm going to take the 2 middle ones of these 4 cords and bring them just down to the bottom of the board and just put them into a slot so we can kind of hold them taut. And then I'm going to take the other 2 cords and literally make a square knot around them. And make sure we go around both of the holding cords there. So make the first half of the square knot, tighten that up to sit below the top curve, and then make the other half of the square knot. And this one I like to start with my left side and then tighten that. So we have a full square knot there, and then back out to the left side that we were just working on. Now I'm going to move to the right and basically repeat. So separate out the very inner cord that we used for the connection point, and then the 2 outer cords in this case, now they're on the right, and then we have 4 cords left in the middle. The 2 middle ones of those I'm going to bring down and place into a slot so they're kind of held taut. And now on this side here, I'm on the right side, I like to start with the right working cord. So bring that over the holding cords, the other one comes over that and underneath, everything in the middle and up through the loop on the other side here. Now that's the first half of your square knot, and then start with the other side to make the other half, pull it through and then tighten that. So we have a full square knot here as well, and we can just release the cords again. And then I want to make a square knot right in the middle, so basically connect the 2 sides as well. So I'm going to take the 2 cords that we left out from both sides, basically the 2 cords that we made that connection point with, bring those 2 straight down, place them into a slot to hold taut. Then I'm going to take the working cord from either side that we just used to make a knot with, but that's going naturally in towards the middle. And then I'm going to use those to make a square knot around these holding cords with. Pull that tight, and that's going to sit up underneath the cleft of the hat. And then make the other half and tighten that. Then I'm moving back to the sides again. Release your cords, and you can just start whatever side you want to, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go back to the 2 holding cords I used for the first knot we made on this left side. The same 2 holding cords are going down into a slot, and then just make another square knot using the same cords that we used before, But this time, obviously, the inner one has been used for that middle cord that we just made, so it's coming from that knot. And on this side, I'm on the left, so I prefer to start with the left cord and then pull it tight to sit up underneath the previous knot. And then make the other half of it and pull that one tight. Release the cords again, put them out of the way. On the other side, do the same thing. Get the same 4 cords that we used for the first knot on this side. So the 2 holding cords come straight down, go into a slot, and then I take the 2 working cords that we used, and on this side I like to start with the right one and then make the first half, tighten that up underneath the previous one, and then make the other half. And there we go. Now we're almost done with the pattern inside of the hat. We just have one more square knot left to do, and that is going to be another one in the middle. So get the same 2 holding cords from that knot, bring them straight down, place them into a slot, and then we just want to make another square knot around these holding cords using the 2 working cords from the knots we just made on the side. And in this case here, it doesn't really matter, it's up to you, but I like to make sure I start with the opposite cord to what I did with the first knot in the middle. But again, that's completely up to you if you're bothered about that. It's just to kind of even out the pattern inside of the hat here. And then make the other half to complete this square knot. And there we go. Can release those cords. And basically what we need to do now is continue the frame around this pattern inside the hat that we just made. So I'm just going to move to one of the sides. Again, doesn't matter which one you start with. Then I'm going to put all the other cords out of the way. So I just have the 2 outer cords here. That's the outer holding cord, and then the outer working cord on that very last knot there. Now I'm just making sure that that is nice and tight, because then what I'm going to do is basically make them swap places. So I'm going to take the working cord, bring it underneath the holding cord, and then make another double half hitch with opposite hands. So they still have the same job. The one I'm holding here is still the holding cord. I'm just now making the knot in the opposite direction. So I'm going to do double half hitch, and then tighten it, and then it's going to tighten up next to itself, and then make sure you hold the holding cord kind of more in a downwards direction here. So we're building the row further along the side of the hat. You can see that's kind of going to hug around the side there, and also around the side of the pattern that we made. And then just leave that working cord out of the way. Now grab the very next cord, which is coming from the last knot here. Make sure to bring that cord underneath the holding cord, and we need to keep building this row. I'm going to make a double half hitch with this, and then tighten that knot right next to the other ones. And then we want to make sure that the row that we're making here is going to sit tight around the square knots that we made in the middle, because like I said, we're kind of using them as a guide to make the hat shape. So that's a double half hitch. Moving on, the next cord in line is one of the holding cords coming straight down from that knot. So just grab the one that you run into first, bring it underneath, make a double half hitch, and now we want to start working our way back in towards the middle as the natural shape of the hat would have, and then do the other half, tighten that in place, take the other holding cord from that knot and then bring it underneath. Now use it as a working cord, make the double half hitch, tighten the first half, and then tighten the other half, and you can see we're now working our way back towards the middle, and you can really start to see that curved part on the top and then the side, and then making our way back in towards the middle. That's going to be the bottom point of the hat. Then you want to take the working cord that's coming from the middle knot there, again bring that underneath, make a double half hitch, continue the row, and then we have one cord left for this side, which is the first one you run into out of the 2 holding cords that are coming straight down from the middle knot. So just bring that underneath and create your next double half hitch and tighten that. And then that's the one side here done. So what I'm going to do is just grab all these cords that I've just used, put them out of the way, and move on to the other side and basically do the same thing. So I'm just going to separate out my cord so I can get hold of the right ones to start with. And that is the holding cord from the row that we're making, and then the cord coming from that very last knot. So remember, we bring that working cord directly underneath the holding cord again, and then we just need to make a double half hitch with that working cord. It's now just coming out in the opposite direction. Tighten that, and remember to start working your way downwards, and then tighten the other half, and then we grab the cord coming from the knot inside of the hat. Pull that tight, and then make sure the row here is coming tight against all the knots inside of the hat, so we don't have too much of any gaps around. Then grab the first holding cord from that knot. You can see we're just continuing the row, one knot at a time. The other holding cord from that same knot. And then again, just make sure you're now working your way in towards the middle, and then you can see where the holding cords from either side are going to cross over is where the point of the hat at the bottom there is going to be. So that's where you want to aim for. Grab the next cord you run into, use that as your working cord, build in that row, tighten that, and then we have one cord left that's coming from the middle knot there. Make sure as you're making this knot, it's going to meet up nicely with the very last knot we made on the other side. So you can see they create that perfect point on the bottom part of the hat. Now of course the two sides are not connected, so we're going to do that, and I'm simply just going to cross over the right one and the left one comes underneath, and I'm just doing that in the same direction as I did up on the cleft. Again, just making sure it stays consistent throughout. And then we just want to make one more double half hitch to connect the two sides, where we then get the final hat shape. So that is now the very first hat created, and basically from here we just want to keep creating hat after hat, but in between them I just like to add a few beads. So what I'm going to do is just separate the cords out. Again, just start on one side at a time, doesn't matter what side you start on. The two outer cords here, what I'm going to do is add my bead to the very outer one. So just add one bead at a time, let it drop all the way down to sit right on the side of the hat there. So this cord with the bead on is the working cord, and the other cord right next to it is the holding cord. So I'm going to take the working cord over the top of the holding cord, back underneath and out through the loop of itself, so we get that 6. Then just tighten that to sit right up next to the row, and just make sure that bead sits nice and tight in place. Now I'm going to bring the cord underneath the holding cord, back over the top and through the loop of itself, so just in the opposite direction, and then tighten it up. And there we then have a vertical lark's head knot. From there I'm going to grab another bead and just add that onto the same working cord, let it drop all the way down, and then do the exact same thing. So first I'm bringing the working cord over the top of the holding cord and tightening it, and then I'm bringing it underneath and through and tightening it, and there we go. And then I'm going to add one final bead here on the same cord again, let it drop down, and in this case I'm just going to let it kind of sit there for now. So we're not going to make another vertical lark's head knot to cage that in place. What I'm going to do instead is just put these out of the way, and also the very middle cord here, the one we used to make that very point of the hat, just put that out of the way. So we're left with these 4 cords in the middle, and we're going to take the second furthest to the outside, and I'm then going to add a bead to that one as well. Let that drop all the way down, and then I can just take all of these, put them out of the way, because this side is ready to start the next hat, but I just need to repeat the same on the other side as well. So I'm just starting with the 2 outer cords. The very outer one is the working cord, so that gets a bead on it. Let it drop down, and then we use that around the holding cord that's right next to it. And first we go over, tighten that, and then we go under and then tighten that. The same working cord, we add another bead, go over and tighten, and go under and tighten. And then the same working cord, we add the final bead, let it drop down, and then just let it hang out there. Put them out of the way, and then we just need to pick out the cord in the middle where we want to add our bead. The very inner one we can take out of the way, and then out of the 4 here that we're left with, again it's the second outer one, so not the one that's furthest out to the side of these 4, but the next one in, and just add the final bead on this side, let it drop all the way down. So now we have both sides here ready to start our next hat. So again, working on one side at a time, start with whichever one you feel comfortable with, it doesn't matter. Then I'm gonna separate out the 2 outer cords here, and then the very inner one. So again, just like if you remember at the very beginning, we're left with the 4 cords. In this case, one of them has a bead on it, but the 2 middle ones out of those 4 we just have coming straight down, and then the other 2, so the one on either side of those, we're going to cross over in opposite directions. So there we go, just like this, and then hold on to those 2 cords. Take 1 cord at a time that's coming underneath. In this case, I'm just starting with the one with the bead, and then make a double half hitch. Now as we tighten the first half here, we can tighten it all the way up to sit right below the bead, so kind of use that as a guide. Make the other half. And I just like to make sure the first half is nice and tight before I then tighten the other half so it stays exactly where I want it to sit. Tighten that right underneath that bead, and then take the other cord here, it's coming straight down, and make the double half hitch right next to the first one. And this again now we want to make sure is in a straight line across, just like the very top parts when we made them in the beginning. So they sit a little something like this. Now it looks a bit odd, but what we're going to do again is take the holding cords and pull them tight, because you can see we have this loop kind of loose and in the way. Now before I pull tight, I like to just check if everything is nice and even. Now sometimes I find that they can be a little bit tangled around each other. In this case, I'm just going to pull the loose cord on this side through the loop so that when I pull the other side taut, it sits nicely. And then there you can see it just makes that row right underneath the bead. And then from here we can just continue. So we're going to start with the holding cord on the outside here. It's crossing over the other cords, where in this case we have the beads on as well. I'm just going to take the holding cord first of all. That's coming straight underneath. That's the first one we run into. Just make a double half hitch, continuing the row that we just made. And also we need to start working our way downwards at an angle so we get that curve in place. And then the same with the last cord in this case that has that loose bead on it. Just make sure that bead stays in place as we're then tightening our knot. So make the double half hitch, and you can see I'm working my way downwards again. We can just go to the middle part then and just make the inner side that's going to go towards the cleft. So I have the holding cord. The other cord that we're going to be using as a working cord is coming from the very middle. Bring it underneath and make a double half hitch. And that is going to be in the direction right underneath where the bottom point of the hat is, basically the one above it of course. Because the hats are literally going to sit right underneath each other. So the bottom point of one is going to perfectly fit into the cleft part of another. So this is one side done. Move to the other side and do the same thing. So first of all, separate your cords out. The 2 outer ones that we used for that beaded section, out of the way for now. And then the very inner one, also out of the way. So we're left with those 4 that we need to make the straight line with. So remember, the 2 middle ones just come straight down, and then the 2 outer ones of the 4 here are going to cross to opposite sides. So we have this section with both cords overlapping each other that we can then make our knots around. And just start with the first one. Take the first length here, and we just want to tighten this down to sit, so it's going to end up sitting right underneath where the bead is, just like it does on the other side. And then do the other half and pull that tight. Take the cord with the bead on, make sure the bead stays in that little gap so that when we pull the knot tight, it gets trapped in place. And do the other half, and then we need to pull our holding cords tight, but remember, before we do, just make sure that they're not too tangled up in each other. So I'm just going to take this through because I can see that it's a little bit tangled up, and then I'm going to pull the 2 holding cords through so we get rid of this loose end, and we fully end up with that straight line just below that bead. And then we can just continue with this holding cord, grab the very first working cord from the outer group there, and as you start to make your knot, also come down a bit in the angle so we create the curve. And then the next one, I can see the bead almost wanted to run away, so just make sure it's pushed back down where we want it to sit before we then bring it underneath and make our knot to trap it in place as well. And we started to come downwards on this outer side. Now just get to the inner cord so we can just finish off that inner cleft part. So grab the holding cord, and then we have the final cord on this side that we haven't used yet. It's right in the middle. That comes underneath and makes double half hitch with that. And here you can just follow the line that we have from the previous hat. Basically it's going to sit right underneath that. And then we have the 2 holding cords, one from each side, naturally crossing here in the middle, which is where we're going to have the cleft. So we might as well do that straight away. And again, if you want to do it consistently, I'm taking the right one over the left one. So that means the left one is the working cord. So I'm just going to make another double half hitch with that. And that's now created the cleft of the hat. And you can see that sits perfectly underneath the point on the one above it. And this is then the point where we move to the middle of the hat and create the pattern there that's kind of filling it in. So on one side at a time, we need to create our square knots. We just want to get back to the 4 cords kind of in the middle of each side. So the 2 outer ones out of the way and the inner one on that side out of the way. So we have these 4 left, where the 2 middle ones will be the holding cords, and those we can bring down, place into a slot to help hold them taut. And then I like to start with the outer one to create the square knot, tighten that to then sit under the top curved part of the hat, and make the other half of course. And we have our square knot. Release your cords again, move to the other side, find the same 4 cords in the middle of this group here, put the other ones out of the way, and the 2 middle ones of these 4 come straight down into a slot so we can make our square knot around them. And again, I'm starting with the outside cord, tighten that up, and then make the other half so we have our full square knot. And then from here we'll go straight on to the middle, where I'm going to use the working cord from the knot I just made and the same equivalent one on the other side. And the 2 very middle cords here coming from the cleft are going to come down and be the holding cords. And then we just make our square knot around those, tighten that up to the other half, and we have the square knot in the middle. Moving on from there, we go back to one side at a time to those same 4 cords that we started out making square knots with. The 2 same holding cords as before, and make your square knot around those. Remember, this cord is now coming from the middle square knot. Tighten that, and then the other half, and on the other side find those same 4 cords as well. 2 holding cords come straight down, and then use the same cords as before to make our square knot with. And the final square knot we need to make is back in the middle. So those 2 holding cords from the very middle straight down into a slot. And then remember, this is where I then like to make this square knot in the opposite direction to the first one in the middle. So I'm starting with the right one in this case. I started with the left one on the previous knot, tighten that, and then do the other half and tighten that. So there we have the very middle of the hat filled in. We need to go back to the sides and create the frame and the final shape of the hat. So again, start wherever you want to. I'm going to go back to the left, just make sure that last knot is tightened. So the 2 outer cords here, I'm going to take the holding cord and then take the working cord underneath that. So again, they swap places, but they keep the same jobs. We're just making our knot in the opposite direction. So make your double half hitch and make sure that the holding cord is coming more straight downwards so we get that curve in place. Do the other half to make it a double, and then find the very next cord that we're running into, which is coming from the square knot in the middle here. Bring it underneath and then tighten this, making sure the row on the outside here is going to be nice and tight against all the square knots in the middle. Then we run into a holding cord from that knot next. Use that to continue the row. And then the next holding cord from the same knot, working our way in towards the middle, making sure we're now coming at an angle. So we're going to end up in the middle where we're going to have that connection point that's going to create the point of the bottom part of the hat. And then I have a working cord from the middle knot. Make your double half hitch nice and tight. And then finally we have the furthest left holding cord from that middle knot. Make your double half hitch to finish off the row on this side. There we go. Now go to the other side, repeat the same thing, start with the 2 cords furthest out to the side, make sure that's nice and tight, and then just swap hands with them so we can make the next knot here in the opposite direction. Make the first half, come more downwards again to get the curve, and then make the other half. And then take the cord coming from the knot in the middle, tighten that, and as you can see, just make sure it's nice and tight so we don't have too many gaps. Then it's a holding cord from that knot next. Make your knot, continue that row, and then the other holding cord from that same knot. Do your double half hitch, grab the very next cord you run into, continue the row, working our way towards the middle, and then we have one left that we then end up perfectly aligning with the row on the other side. So you can see the two holding cords, one from either side, are crossing perfectly there. So we just want them to naturally cross over each other. And again, I like to keep it consistent, so I take my right one over the left one and then just make another double half hitch to basically finish off the hat and make that bottom point of it. There we go. So that is now hat number 2 completed. So all you need to do now is keep repeating what I just showed you. So next we need to do the beaded section. So add the beads, make the knots on the side there, prepare both sides to be able to start creating the next hat. And you want to keep doing this for however long you need this to be. So once we reach the other end, it's time to finish off the bracelet. I'm going to do that by creating kind of a straight line below the last hat there. But before we do that, I'm also just going to add in my final beads. So just starting on one side at a time. Again, I'm going to add the beads to the outer edge in the same way as previously. So take the very outer cord, add a bead, let it drop all the way down, and then I'm going to grab the second cord in and just trap that bead in place in the same way as all the other times. So that's one, and then I'm going to add another bead, let it drop down, and then also trap that in place by going over and then under, and tighten that, and I'm going to leave it at that. So previously we added 3 between the hats there, but in this case I'm going to leave it at 2 beads because that's where we get to more the level point where the bottom of the hat is as well. Now of course I'm going to just do the same on the other side, and then to get the straight line across, what I'm going to use is the same technique that we used to start the hats out with. So I'm just going to take all my cords and bring them a little bit further down here. So I've got the 2 outer ones, one on each side singled out. And then I'm going to cross them over all the cords so they overlap each other here. And that's how we're going to create a straight line. So we're just going to work with one cord at a time, working our way across. I kind of just like to start from the middle because that will give us the perfect place where we know we need to stop the other knots as well. So just grab one of those middle cords and then make your double half hitch. And as you tighten it, just make sure that we do have open cords here because we also obviously need to do the rest of them. So we need to have enough to work with. And then tighten it all the way down, right below the hat there. And then do the other half and tighten that in place as well. So we have basically now started our row of knots sitting right below the hat. And then grab the next cord, and I'm just working in one direction first of all. We still have cords on the other side here that we need to use, but just do it however you feel comfortable really. Tighten that right next to the previous knot, make your double half hitch, keep hold of both of the holding cords there, and then tighten the knot. So you can see we have a nice straight row started here right below the hat, and then we literally just work our way across one cord at a time. Always make sure you grab the very next cord so they don't overlap, and make your next double half hitch, tighten that. And obviously here we're going to have a bit of gap between the row and the bottom of the hat because it curves upwards. So don't worry about that. You don't want to pull it tight and move upwards. We still want to keep that straight line across. So just make sure you hold the holding cords in that straight direction up to the side. And then keep going until we've used up all the cords on this side. So there we are. Now of course the very last cord is the one we're actually using as the holding cord. So we can now move to the other side and just finish that off. Now if that's gotten a little bit tight, you can just pull it through and open it back up so we've got enough space there to work with. So something like that. Now I like to just take all the cords that I have used out of the way so we don't get tangled up, and then we just need to grab the very next cord that we run into. Again, make sure we don't overlap them here, and then make our double half hitch, around these same two holding cords, and then just continue on this side, going now in the other direction and using all those cords along the way as well. So now we've finished all the knots and we have our full straight line across. Then all we need to do is take the two holding cords, the ends, and start pulling those tight. So we tighten up the loose bits here, pull them all the way through until they sit just nicely, and we have no loose cords on the ends. So this is now our first row of having a straight line across. What I then like to do is make another one just like it, just so it creates a little bit more spacing to be able to put inside of our ribbon end. So you literally do the same thing, use the same two cords, bring them over all the other cords and overlap them there, and then now you can just start from one end, because we literally just want to now get this row of knots right below the other one. So you just start from one end, tighten that all the way down, make the other half, and work your way all the way across one cord at a time. And then again we can pull the holding cords tight once we've finished the row, and then we have two rows here right underneath each other, and then we're going to easily be able to fit the ribbon end on top of this. Now of course we also have the other end, but we just want to do the same thing, so just flip your bracelet around, and then there you don't need to add the beads because the top of the hat is much more level anyway, so just make the two rows here in the same way that I just showed you. So now we've finished making our macrame and we've also prepared the ends. We of course just need to get rid of all the excess cords because they're kind of in the way for us to add our ribbon ends. So what I'm going to do is just on one end at a time. I'm going to cut off the excess, but I'm going to make sure to leave just a couple of millimeters of tail left on all the cords, like that. Put them out of the way. And then I'm going to take a lighter and just basically singe down the ends. In other words, melt them. And you can just push them in. So I can do this because this is a synthetic cord. If you're working with a natural cord, you won't be able to burn them down like this. So you could always just use glue and then cut off the excess. Of course you can do that as well if you prefer it, but just get the end singed in place, and it also just seals them in so they're not going to come undone. I'm also just going to do the two that were the holding cords here, and then just the same thing, singe them down and just push them in, and then we are left with a nice and neat end that fits perfectly inside the ribbon end. Of course you just want to do the same thing with the other end as well. So then we're going to add our ribbon ends. They're going to go right on top of the end rows there, but we just also need to add some glue so we have it nice and secure. So I'm going to just take my E6000 glue and then just a toothpick to apply it with, get a little bit onto the toothpick, and then I'm going to put it inside of the ribbon end, and just make sure to cover the inside walls. We don't need to fill it up because obviously the actual bracelet itself is going to go in there. So any excess glue is just going to come spilling out, but just make sure to cover the inside. And then what I have left, or maybe add a little bit more if you need to, I like to just also put a little bit on the actual end of the bracelet. So when the two pieces get put together and they dry, they're going to adhere nicely. Then I'm just going to place the ribbon end on the end there, and we obviously have to clamp it down, so I'm going to take my chain nose pliers and put a finger on either end to hold it in place while I gradually clamp it down and go from side to side until I'm almost all the way down, and then I just make sure it's still in the middle and I'm happy with how it sits. And then you just want to go in and do your final squeezes, make it nice and secure. And I also just like to go in from the sides so they're closed up as well. And then of course you want to do the other end, let them dry, and then you have these loops in the ribbon ends that we can attach our findings to. And then once you've attached your clasp as well, your bracelet is finished and ready to wear. So that's how you make this cute macrame hat bracelet, and of course using different materials will give you different results. Now you can check out my channel, I have loads of tutorials within many different mediums, and of course you can like and share, and there's also a super thanks button below if you'd like to help out that way. Otherwise I really hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you so much for watching it, and I'll see you in the next one.